Hello, on this video I'm going to show you how to use Visual Studio to create a MVC project, and also I'm going to talk about how the controller and how the action works on a model view controller project. So I'm going to create a new project on Visual Studio and I'm going to search for MVC, and I have a couple of options. One is the C# and the other one is not, so I'm going to pick the one with the C# one. I'm going to give it a name, click next, and then I'm going to uncheck the configure for HTTPS because I'm not going to use this for this video. Click on create, and here I have my project. So I'm going to go over the Solution Explorer, and if you notice, I already have some contents created for me. So I'm going to run this program just to see what we have. And this is what we have. So I'm going to do some cleanup. While I do that, I'm going to explain to you how some of these folders here work. So right here in the Solution Explorer, and by the way, if you don't see the Solution Explorer, go to View and then Solution Explorer right here. So the Solution Explorer in a MVC project has a couple of very important folders. So one is the controller folder, the other one is the model, and the other one is the views folder. So generally speaking, every time you have a controller, you should have a corresponding folder with the same name. So the name of this controller here is home, but the name of the file and the name of the class is home controller. So I'm gonna double click on this controller, and you're gonna see that the controller is just a regular class with some other things in it. Then I have the model folder, and the model folder also is just a regular class with some properties. And then finally I have the views folder, and inside the views folder I have a folder corresponding to the controller I have. So in this case, this is a home folder that belongs to the home controller. So if I expand this, I have the index, and this is the file that loads first, and then I have the privacy view as well. So I'm going to delete the privacy view just because I want this to be very simple. And then on the index, I'm going to remove all this code, and I'm just going to put a header here. Just a comment say, hey, I am the index. And the other thing I want to do, I want to remove this, and I want to say layout equals null. And that's going to remove the layout. If I don't have this line here, by default, it will include this layout on the page. And that's the extra things you see on the page when you load it. Now, I'm not going to talk about layout on this video because on one of the following videos, I'm going to dedicate an entire video only for layout. But the layout is just HTML code that will be applied to all of your views if you choose to do so. I'll talk more about layout in the future. But for now, I'm going to put layout equals null here. That means I do not want any layout. So if I run this program again, I get just this, I am the index. All right, so now that we have the controller, the model, and the view, let's talk a little bit more on the controller. The controller is a class that has what's called the action. And here I have three actions: the action for the index, the action for privacy, and then the action for arrow. I'm going to remove a couple of these actions right here just to make this file a little simpler. So I'm going to collapse this, and let's focus on this specific function only. So this is a function, and on MVC we call this the action. So this is the action for the index. So on a website you have some page, and then you have other pages. So let's say this is the index page, and this is some other page. I'm going to call this page 2. On a normal HTML code, if you have a link right here, a href, and if you want to go to the other page, you will just straight go to the other page with the link. However, on MVC, you cannot do this. So this is not how MVC works. So if you're doing MVC code, you have to pass through the controller. So there is a file that we have that's called controller. In this case, it's a home controller. So this is the home controller. And when you want to go from one view to the other view, you have to go to the controller. And then the controller can choose to send you to page 2. And inside the controller, there is a function that we call action. And this action is what decides where you go. So one page calls the action on the controller, and then from the controller, it decides where you want to go. So when the page first loads, it loads the index action, and the index action is returning the view. Now, how does it know which view it's returning? It knows because this controller is the home controller, and if you just return the view, it will look for the index view inside the home folder first. So in this case, it will look inside the home folder, and we will look for the index view. If it doesn't find here, it will look inside the shared folder. But because the index view is right here in the home folder, it will return this thing. So when I run the program, the index action gets called and it gets returned the index. Now, this index here can choose to return something else. It can return whatever you want. But for now, I'm going to return just the view, and then once I build another couple of views, I'm going to show you that you can return actually a different view. Alright, so I'm going to create a second action now. So I'm going to copy this and paste, and then this action I'm going to call page 2. So now I have a action called page 2. I'm going to save, and then I'm going to right click on page 2, and I'm going to click on add view. And then you're going to see that after I click on view, it will create a page 2 view inside the home folder. So I'm going to click on add view and click on add page 2, click on add, and now I have the page 2 right here. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the page 2, and I'm going to choose the not to use the layout. So layout equals null for now, and I'm going to create another header here just to say I am the page 2. So if I'm on index and I just want to go to page 2, I can write a link just to go to page 2. So simple link to page 2. Alright, so the link is going to be a tag, and then the href is going to be a code. So at URL dot action, and this is a function that needs two things: the action that you were trying to go, so the action is page 2, and then the controller. So the controller in this case is home. Remember, the name of the class and the name of the file is homecontroller.cs, but the name of the controller is just home. So that's why I'm gonna put home right here. So this is the controller, and this is the action inside the home controller. And then finally, I just put a text here to maybe go to page 2. All right, so I'm gonna run this program, and now right here on the index, I have a link to go to page 2, and if I click it there, it goes to page 2. Now remember, everything passes through the controller. Because of that, this link does not go directly to page 2. It actually goes to the controller, and it comes right here, and then the controller chooses to return the page 2. But like I said before, the controller can return something else too. Instead of returning the view, the controller can return a string, and let's just pass banana back. So instead of passing a whole view, it's just gonna pass a string back. So if I run this program now, and if I click on go to page 2, well, it just returns a banana. Now, if you look right here in the URL, it thinks you are on page 2, but you never went to page 2. You are on page 2 action from the home controller. Now, this is how you pass a string. You can also pass a different view to return. So if you return view, it returns page 2, but you can also return a different view. So in this case, I'm going to return the index. So if I return the index, once I click here on page 2, it goes to the page 2 action in the controller, and that action sends you back to index. So if I click here, it goes to the controller and just comes back to the index. Now, one interesting thing is, even though you are on the index page, it thinks you are on page 2. Look at the URL, says page 2. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to type index, or better yet, home, and then index, and I'll go to the index page. And if I click on go to page 2, it actually goes back to the index, but it thinks you're on page 2. All right, so the whole point here is that everything goes through the controller. So I'm going to put the code back here. And now I want to talk about the model. So we talk about the view. The view is just a page. The controller is what controls all the flow of your websites, of your MVC websites. And now the model is just a class with some properties. So I'm going to create a model here. So I'm going to add a class, and I'm going to call this class the animal class. Click OK. And then right here, the model is just a bunch of properties. So I'm going to type prop. And then once I type prop, it creates a property for me. So I'm going to change this property from int to string. And then my property to maybe the type of animal. And I'm going to do the same thing again with another string, and maybe the name of the animal, and maybe one more, maybe the food that the animal eats. So in this would be my model. Now there's a green squiggly here, and that's because it's concerned about being null. So if you just put a question mark here, that means, hey, this thing may be null. So question mark, and that warning goes away. All right, so as you can see, the model is just a class that has properties. And this is important because the way you pass data from one view to the other view, or better yet, from the view to the controller to another view, is through models. So you can use something else, but it's very, very silly. Using models is the best way for you to move data from one page to the controller to a second page. So now that we have this model, let's use this model to pass some information from the index to the page 2. So I'm gonna, right here, I'm gonna say using the model to pass data to controller, and then to page 2 eventually. So because I'm using the model, I need to add the model into this view so we can use it. So right here in line 4, I'm going to put an @ and then model with lower m. Don't put with capital M. So the model is going to be the name of the project, in this case MVC project dot models dot whatever model I'm looking for. So in this case, I want to use the animal model. So once I have this animal model here, then this class, the animal class, is available for this file. And now I can start using inputs. So I'm gonna create a input here. And on these inputs, I'm gonna put ASP4. And the option for ASP4 is the property from your animal class, or better yet, the properties from your animal model. And the properties that I have there is going to be name, and I have another one called type of animal. And then finally, I have another one, if I recall correctly, food. So these are the properties from the animal model. Now, I need to post this data to the controller. Because I need to post the data, I do need to create a form. So I'm going to create a form here. And then I'm going to put all of these inputs inside the form. And then I'm going to give it an action for this form. So ASP action. And the action is going to be, well, the action of the home controller that I want to call. So I want to call the page 2 action of the home controller. And then finally the method is going to be post, because I want to post this data to the controller. And then finally, I need a way to submit this bad boy. So I'm just going to create a button here. And this button is the submit button. Type submit. So now, this is an ugly form, but it works. If I run this program now, I get an ugly form, but it works. So if I type something, click on submit, it actually went to the controller and then it went to the page 2. Now let's go to the controller now, and I want to take a look on page 2. So all the information from the animal model got posted to the action of the page 2. But the page 2 is not receiving anything as a parameter. Because it's not receiving anything as a parameter, you cannot see any of the data. Now to solve this problem, I want to create the animal class right here as a parameter, and now I have all the animal data right here on this action. Now, just for testing purpose, I'm going to put a stopper right here on line 24, and then I'm going to run the debugger. So debug, start debugging, or just press the F5. All right, so here I have the page. I'm just going to type some random data and click on submit. And then it came all the way to the stopper, and then the stopper stopped the code from executing. And now if I go right here on the autos, I see the A object, which is the model. So I'm going to expand the model, and I see here that the model has the food set to some random string that I type, and the same thing for name, the same thing for type. So those were actually bad strings that I typed because they're exactly the same. So I want to run the debugger one more time, because I want to make sure that what I type is actually getting there. So I'm going to type AAA, BBB, and CCC just to make sure that everything is getting there, and sure enough, everything is getting there properly. So I always like to do that just to make sure that my data is getting to this action properly. So now that I know for sure that the animal model is getting here, I can now pass the animal model down to page 2. The animal model is coming from index, then it's coming right here to the action, and then I'm just going to pass it down to page 2 view. So on page 2, I need to add the model, and that's going to be model with lower m, the name of the projects, dot folder, and dot the actual model. And now I can just display the information that's coming down from the controller. And to do that, I'm going to use the add word and then model with capital M this time. Do not use a lower m. and the dot notation, and then whatever thing you want to display. So I want to display the name, for example, and then I want to display maybe the food, and then the type of animal we have. And I'm going to put a break here just to have separate lines, just to be a bit more organized. And now I'm gonna type here the AABBCC, click on submit, and then once I click on submit, it goes to the controller, and then the controller sends it down to page 2. So submit, and now I go to page 2, and I do have the strings or the data that came from page 1. Now I want to do one more thing here on the index. I just want to create some labels here. So I'm going to create a label, and here I want to put name for the label, and then type, and then finally food. And then in between them, I want to put a line break, and a line break here as well, and a line break here as well. So I just want to put some labels so it looks a little prettier, and I'm going to do the same thing on page 2. Instead of just displaying like that, I'm going to put a label right here just to look a little bit more organized. And then here I'm going to put another label with food, and then another label with type. All right, so let's run this program one more time. And the name is going to be like, the type is going to be and, the food is going to be subscribe. So now if I click on submit, it goes to the second page, and then I have the information that I type from the index, which was my first page. So the whole point of this video is for you to understand that on MVC, everything goes to the controller. So when you are on one page and you want to go to a second page, you don't call the second page, you actually call the action of that page. And then this action can choose what to do. The action may choose to return a string, may choose to return a different index or a different view, or you may choose to return the actual view, but the action decides what to do. And this is very powerful because here you can do some testing, some logic, and do something else. Do whatever you want to do. For the next video, we're going to send this data to a database, but that's a topic for the next video. All right, so that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.